to call the meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Uplift Education. It's Tuesday, October 24th, 2017, and it is 4:33. Hey, that's pretty close, guys. I want to, before I do anything, this is so important to all of us, and I want to thank especially all of the fabulous leaders of our organization who are back there behind us and behind every one of our scholars. So I want to say special thanks. Really terrific. And second, we have fabulous scholars who will be in need, have needs, their families have needs over the Christmas holidays. And Cassie, thank you very much for being here with us today. Please, if you forgot to go and get gift cards, she's happy to take a check. Made out to, or cash, made out to Uplift Education. And we all know that that would be a great benefit to the scholars and their families who are in need. So thank you for doing that.
And thank you to Town and Abby who started the program many years ago.
Yes.
That's very appreciated.
Yes, out of your house.
I know, Abby, I still remember when the E-Team would come wrap presents at your house. It was really fun.
So it's certainly taken off and very much appreciated for that leadership. At any rate, if we could, the minutes have been distributed via email. Do I hear any changes, edits, corrections, whatever? And if not, do I hear a motion to approve as sent? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you. We are going to skip down in our agenda today. Becky Madole is with us, and she's going to give us a pre-K update. She has another commitment that she needs to get to, and so we want to honor that time. Becky, thank you for all you do, but we're looking forward to this as well.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for being here, of course, and thank you for what you do. We're going to just zoom through a quick pre-K update for this year's programming and then projected programming for next year. I'm Becky. I'm Director of Strategic and Community Partnerships here at Uplift, and pre-K is one of the partnership areas in my team. Real quick, we're going to talk about Uplift's approach to pre-K, which I'm sure you all know already, but we partner with well-known providers of high-quality early childhood programs. This is because currently the state only funds half-day pre-K, so it's to our benefit that we partner in order to deliver it. And also we know that the early childhood space is a special space, and to have experts in that particular area is very beneficial to kids. Where possible, we leverage available facilities to house those programs, and then we encourage existing Uplift families with younger scholars to apply to that pre-K. So currently this year, Uplift works with 3 different pre-K partners. We have about 500 pre-K scholars that matriculate into 7 Uplift primary schools. We host those programs on-site at Uplift schools and then off-site at the pre-K provider in the community. 2 quick things. One is families apply online for our pre-K program just like they would apply for a K-12. They have to meet certain qualifications in order for the state to fund that pre-K. Most of our scholars qualify because of financial guidelines. And children who enroll in Uplift pre-K are automatically accepted into kindergarten the following year, so it's a great pipeline. This is a quick program overview so you can see the various iterations of programming that we have. The blue lines are programs we host in an actual Uplift facility. And you'll notice that we've got a few red lines, and those are actually non-Uplift scholars that for various reasons we host within our building. The example at Meridian was such that we were able to offer this program if the partner was able to bring on more kids and have a site coordinator. So there's various reasons we do that. But the one thing I did want to point out was the green classrooms before we look at next year's projections. The green classrooms represent hybrid Uplift Head Start models, which was something we experimented with for the first time last year at Uplift Meridian. And what we do is pay for half of the day with half-day pre-K funds and the other half with Head Start, so that families get a full day option, which we know is really beneficial for families. And what we found is, one, it's super easy to fill, and two, the Head Start program allows for all of the family services that come with that federal program. And so added 2 Head Start classrooms this year, and then you'll see next year, all of the green, we're continuing to expand those Head Start offerings. The partners we work with, it's very competitive to get Head Start spots, and so there's a huge kind of relational trade-off piece that happens in terms of getting those spots to our campuses, and so we're really excited that that's gonna happen. The orange areas are additions for next school year. So you'll see we're adding Grand and Triumph pre-K, and we're expanding with Mia Squalita for those 2 sites. Those will be on-site in an Uplift facility. And then there's a few locational changes that will happen. But overall, our numbers from this year represented about a 50% increase in number of scholars served. That corresponded with our receiving a federal grant that's administered through the TEA that has really allowed us to experiment with some best-in-class practices for pre-K programs. So the 3 things really that's allowed us to do as I wrap up is, 1, to work with our data team to create a pre-K evaluation platform. And this is going to allow us to drill down and really see from program to program what success looks like for these different partners, and that will obviously inform who we expand with and how we track kids into kindergarten. So we're excited to use those federal funds that way. Another thing that those funds have allowed us to do is really focus for this year on integrating the partner program with the school that these students matriculate to. So that has looked like some supplementary professional development for our partners' pre-K teachers that Marilyn has led, that we pay them to attend Uplift PD several times a year, so we really are seeing that cohesive pipeline. And then the third thing that is not related to the grant that we're really excited about is to have more support from the teaching and learning curriculum coordinator side, which we all kind of saw a need for. And my team's focus is all of the logistical complications that happen when you serve 500 kids with 3 different partners. But the curriculum side has really increased our capacity to ensure that there's that alignment within our pipeline. And so this is really an opportunity in a year to look at that very closely. So that's very general. I know I zoomed through that. If you have questions, I don't know if we want to reach out separately or open up the floor. Yeah.
You mentioned that we accept students who are not Uplift students. Why do we do that? Is it because we don't have room for them in kinder once they matriculate up, or?
It's a good question. So those red students here, at Meridian, we have a pre-K wing. And when we were kind of courting that Head Start partner to move classrooms there, they said, we can move classrooms, but we really can't do this financially and provide a site coordinator unless we have 4 classrooms there. But if we did 4 classrooms, then we'd close out the pipeline in pre-K and have no kindergarten spots. So we didn't want to offer 4 Uplift classrooms of pre-K. Does that make sense? And so these 2 classrooms are exposed to the Uplift way. They actually wear a kind of a little version of a uniform. They do a lot of Uplift things, and then they apply to kinder, but they don't matriculate automatically, and that really also helped us fill kinder seats at Meridian, but then does not complete the pipeline immediately.
Part of the reason also that we're trying to be really mindful of, and as a response to some parent feedback that we had early on when we started offering pre-K, is the income thresholds for qualifying for pre-K from the state are pretty low. And so if we have a middle income family or a slightly below middle income family that can't qualify to go to our pre-K, and they have an older sibling in our schools and want to be able to have their sibling have a shot at coming in for kinder, we wanted to make sure there were still spots for our families who didn't meet the income eligibility requirements for pre-K, and that's why we're super mindful of, ideally we'd like 80 children to flow through, from pre-K to our kindergarten with 20 spots available for siblings that don't meet income eligibility requirements, or just other community members of the broader community that would want to come through. And just one of the things for the board to note, because I personally got this question from some community members and from some school leaders asking about, do we ever offer paid pre-K as an option? TEA, and Alex helped investigate and look into this. TEA has different rules around paid pre-K than they do for charters than for traditional ISDs. And so it's actually pretty complicated for us to offer paid pre-K, because the requirement is that any eligible pre-K child from an income requirement has to be served first. So if literally, we can't actually say we're gonna hold 10 spots for paid pre-K. We're at whim of how many come through the lottery, and hence we could actually be oversubscribed or not have enough facility space to try to accommodate the children coming through who are income eligible, and hence why we made the decision not to offer paid pre-K for next school year, because of the logistics and the risk of actually having too many pre-K scholars than we have kindergarten spots.
Quick question on, I think Infinity and Luna.
Sure.
We're low there in terms of what we thought we were going to have as students. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah, we are low at Infinity and Luna, and part of that is going with the Head Start model, which is what we're really kind of talk through the trade-offs. So if we have 80 that go into kinder, we only want 2 classrooms. If you do a Head Start, you then don't have the 40, the AM and the PM. And so there's trade-offs, and we look very closely at numbers as it relates to that. If we think we can fill Head Start spots, which means it's even stricter economic guideline, and we felt that those 2 particular schools were sites that could really benefit from the Head Start model.
So at those 2, is our Head Start program pretty close to full?
Yes, yeah. The Head Start program is closer to full than our PM program, actually, at the first classroom. PM is always hard to fill because it's hard for parents to get there during lunch for half a day. But Head Start, those 2 sites came on kind of late. We got our TEA approval late, so we expect them to reach full enrollment next year. They're not fully enrolled, but we always know that Head Starts are easier to fill than the half day.
And then just from a budget standpoint, if we're short in terms of enrollment on that, the 3 providers or partners we pay them on a per child basis, so.
Yeah, we have a small holdback, and then we furnish the rest of the ADA money to them. So if we're short enrollment, typically they're okay. If we are egregiously short, we do have to relook at what our holdback is, and those conversations can happen, but that's very rare.
Okay.
Anyone else? Great questions, and thank you very much, Becky. This is, you have a question? Sorry. No, beg
What's your
pardon.
feedback from the kindergarten who have these pre-K kids?
Yeah, we have the qualitative feedback, which is those campuses say, we love it. You have a Whitney Hurwitz who said, we love the kids that we're getting from Miospolita. And then we have the quantitative feedback that I think you all saw at your board retreat, where we see kids that have gone through the Uplift pre-K program. We have more quintile 4 and 5 scholars. So our kids are reaching higher quintiles who have gone through our pre-K program.
Anyone else?
The other thing I've heard is because they're managed by third parties, for the people on the campuses, it's responsible for the campus, it's easier for them to manage because they really are truly managed by third party. So
I would say the most complicated part about the partnership is we are responsible for special education services. And that's something that a lot of our partner organizations do not have a lot of experience with. And typically, if they have a special ed student in pre-K, they will send that child out to another pre-K center, and so just getting their staff up to speed on how we serve special ed students, I would say, is probably the #1 challenge we've had to work through. But that's why this grant that allows us to have more professional development time with the teachers to provide them that training has been really valuable.
And I'll say there are some messy parts. Any partnership work is messy, but with this grant having originated for the first time this last year, we realized over and over again on these calls, Uplift has been ahead of this for several years. So people are just kind of dabbling in this partnership hybrid model, and we've been doing it for several years. And so that's really exciting. Again, still lots of work and continuous improvement, but we are really at the forefront of where TEA is going in general and incentivizing districts and providers to do this work together. All right, thank you guys so much. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Excellent work. Excellent work. Okay, we're going to go back to our regular reports, and we'll start with our academic day. And I know we've got Rich and Maya and Nancy, so we've got a great team.
A couple of guest speakers today.
To be with us.
It's going. So, just going over some key points from the executive summary. Maya will come up in just a couple of minutes to talk about one of the two initiatives that we've rolled out in our elementary schools and our primary schools. The first one is our primary literacy model. We talked a little bit about that, so Maya's going to spend a few minutes after this presentation talking a little bit more in detail about what that entails for our elementary teachers. And the other piece that we rolled out was this new thing called the tri-weekly math assessments that we've asked the majority of our schools to participate in. Essentially, every 3 weeks we give a math assessment, and we've seen some great results so far. I'm going to go through some data slides in a few minutes that kind of break down the difference between our returning scholars at Uplift in primary versus our new students. And what we're finding is that out of the 22% of the just under 8,000 students that we have in our primary schools, those who are new are overwhelmingly coming in the first and second quintiles, and that is something that we do need to look at a little bit more carefully, not only in K through 2 where we do expect that, especially in our kindergarten, but some of the new students that we're taking in as backfills in grades 3, 4, 5, we do need to think about what interventions look like for them. We also completed our first round of common assessments. So across the entire network, K through 12, we give common assessments. And what was really positive about our primary data was that reading scores went up across every grade, and we did see a spike in the number of students scoring in the advanced ranges in math. So it's really great to see some of our core strategies in play at the end of the first quarter. In middle school, I shared at the board retreat that our data has been relatively consistent over the last 3 years. And so Anson is going to come up after Maya to do a brief presentation on something called course structures, where we're a little bit more specific about the framework teachers are using to push rigor in core content areas. I'll show you the breakdown of our scholars and their math performance, comparing the 20% of our students who are new to Uplift middle schools versus the 80% that are returners. They do come in with a slightly similar distribution, as you'll see in a few minutes, where students are coming in almost equitably across national percentiles. We finished our common assessment rounds in middle school, and we saw a really great jump in our 6th graders, which was really great to see. We did see a little bit of a plateau and decline in our 7th and 8th grade performance, and we're going to need to address that over this next quarter. Going to the next slide, high schools. The really exciting thing is that formally all applications went in the mail earlier in October for the 9 high school programs that are going through IB authorization later this spring. So it's really exciting. And just as a note, this is 9 out of the 16 total IB authorizations we're doing. And the number that I want you to remember is 90% of our schools at the end of the school year should be IB authorized. I was hoping to share our pre-ACT data for our 9th and 10th graders, but with large testing companies, with the volume of assessments that they're doing. They've had some technical issues getting our scores back to us, and so we're hoping to get that out to you all next month. But it is kind of an issue, especially when we set a lot of student and teacher goals based on pre-ACT scores, and it is a key lever that we pull for our college access work. We did see a decline in our common assessments in our high schools, a slight drop in performance, and we attribute that to a few things that have been happening. First is our seniors who had a lower ACT composite than previous classes. We're really trying to provide them with fall semester interventions, as well as the work that the IB applications took this quarter. We hope to be kind of back in business supporting and responding to the data second quarter to get those common assessment scores up across our high schools. And then as a last note with our RTC teams, a very busy time of year. I was over at Mighty this morning. That team is hard at work with their first graduating class, the same with the team at Infinity. It's really exciting to see what's happening at both of those two new campuses. But we hope that the majority of the college applications will be completed really by right before Thanksgiving break. I envision 70 to 80% of the applications being done at that point, and over the next set of board meetings, we'll be reporting out on the distribution of applications by competitiveness and the updates as we start hearing back from colleges. We had two really important events for our RTC work. We had over 20 people participate in the National College Access Conference. It was in Boston this year, and just the excitement of in the space. There are a lot more competitive colleges and universities really excited about our work with IB, and really looking to partner with us and to set up fly-in programs for our juniors and seniors. And it's really exciting just to see how much interest there is in us using IB to prepare students for some of these top colleges and universities. And there were multiple deans and admissions directors that were pulling me and others aside at this conference, just really excited about our work. And then at the end of September, we also held our own Uplift College Fair, where we had over 80 colleges and universities from around the country come. And it was just a really great event. Our seniors are really excited about their college opportunities, but it's a lot of work over the next 2 months for our Road to College teams, and they've been putting in a lot of work. I'm going to quickly just walk through some of our data slides from K through 8, just to let you know just some of the challenges that our primary schools are having. This is really comparing the top row are our returning scholars. And when you think about the K through 2 space, the returning scholars, those are most of our first grade, second grade scholars, as well as our pre-K students who were our scholars last year, versus scholars who are coming in, again, mainly in kindergarten, which is the bottom group, but we do backfill some seats in first and second grade. And if you look, overwhelmingly, over half the students are in the first and second quintiles of the students we're bringing in new. If you look at the third through fifth grade, for the students who are returning, we're we're at 35% of our students in the first and second quintiles in math. For those students who are returning, 3, 4, 5. Just under 40% in reading in Q1, Q2. But if you look at the 8% of backfilling that we do in our grades 3 to 5, and that's a range of some schools picking up 1 to 2 kids, which would be 1 to 2%, versus there are some schools that did experience loss in 3 to 5 in the high teens, where they have to bring in more students. Those new students coming into these grades are coming in around 55% in the bottom 2 quintiles nationally. And so, I've shared this data in previous years where really the likelihood of a student in the first and second quintile passing a STAR test is pretty low. So we do need to think about the systematic interventions that we're doing for the 8% of new students, the majority of the 8% of the new students coming into these grade levels. In 6th through 8th grade, though, it's a different distribution where the students we're bringing in, new, mostly in the 6th grade, with some 7th and 8th grade backfilling, almost resembles the same distribution of students we currently have. And so there's less of what I would consider increased intervention need that we need to have in our primary schools. I just wanted to share this because the question did come up: what is the difference between returning students versus new students? And this is really the first year where we've kind of seen the new students in the middle schools really just slightly below our students who are returning, but in our primary schools, they're just coming in much lower, which is just adding to the intervention challenges in reading and math. But I'll pause right here.
Since you presented that in percentages, what's the real number of the volume of students in the primary grades? So
Yeah.
the magnitude of the interventions then necessary.
Yeah. So if I let's say go to grades 3 through 5, there's 305 students that are new, but over 55% of them, so we're looking at 155 kids that are new in grades 3 through 5 that are well below their peers who have stayed within our system.
K2, that number was higher though.
In K2, that number is much higher, but the majority of these students are new kindergartners who we expect to come in low, but we have 3 years with them until they take, 4 years with them until they take a state test in the end of 3rd grade, and we're able to catch them up. Whereas we're going to have to accelerate that catching up for new students who are coming in at tested grades. Great. I'd love to introduce our first speaker, Maya Baker. She is our Senior Director of Curriculum, and she's also the Managing Director of our primary schools in Fort Worth, and also oversees our ESL team across the network as well. So.
I don't think there's anything else you oversee.
I don't think so. I think that's it. No, I have all this free time. I have tons. Yeah, so I'm really excited to be able to share. I know that primary literacy has been on all of our minds, especially with our most recent data. So I wanted to take a little bit of time and share just some of the work we're doing around it, so you guys feel like you all kind of know what the pushes we're making and can see some of the changes. So this first slide kind of goes through just sort of some of the steps that we took in order to create this model. So we saw kind of a need to do adjustments with our primary literacy, but doing a big shift, like changing your entire model, takes time. So about a year before we put the model out, we started researching. We did 2 major things. We were first looking at all the publications out there. What are people writing and researching about primary literacy? How has that changed in the last few years? And then we went and looked at a lot of our high-performing charter peers to determine what were other folks doing. We participated in a charter growth fund study that actually brought charter schools from across the nation together to talk specifically about just primary literacy and what was actually happening, what schools were getting gains with it, and what work they were doing. And so that was really helpful. In that research, we kind of found 2 different networks that really stood out to us, both in terms of the work that they'd done to design their approach and the results they were getting. So Success Academy and Achievement First, both on the East Coast, really stood out to us. They were getting incredible gains and were able to move kids really quickly. And so we looked a lot at the models that they were using. We really identified what was going to be our research-based approach. We settled on a balanced literacy program with some tweaks to make it really align to our IB programming. Once we decided on the program we were going to use, we actually spent about 6 months doing an Uplift focus group tour. So we hosted 5 focus groups across the network in different locations. We invited our teacher leaders, our leaders across the network to come look at what we were doing and give us input on what they thought was going to be effective, what any concerns were, and specifically what supports they would need to launch. After they did that, we kind of came up with a couple of things that we were going to need to start building out. The first one is a text list and passage bank. One of the main challenges we saw that was happening is that selecting the right text for a scholar to read at the exact right time in the year is very hard. It's definitely a science, and what teachers were doing were picking books they loved, but might not be rigorous enough. And oftentimes we were seeing a book taught in first grade and then the same book taught again in second grade because we didn't have a clear expectation of how those books would be selected. And so we actually went to book lists from all those charter schools that we talked about and started to create an Uplift book list that teachers could select from so they could still have a little bit of choice, but if they were picking books that made sense with grades. And so I do have, if anyone wants to take a look at the whole document's exceptionally long, but I'll pass around just a copy of the 4th grade list so you can kind of see an example of what that looks like. So if you wouldn't mind for me, just passing that around. And so that really was a big first step, was making sure that the materials in front of our scholars were rigorous, they were aligned to IB, and they really made sense in that time and space in the grade level. We also set some expectations for teachers of this is the level of book you should be reading in each grade level so that they could submit requests to us to vet so that if they have a book they really love, if it was appropriate, we wanted to make sure they could teach it. So we were really trying to balance like not losing that passion that comes from teacher choice, but making sure that their choices were really setting our kids up for success. We also created a passage bank because they're not just reading books, like a lot of times they're reading poems and nonfiction texts that looked more like our STAR test. And we actually found all those passages and put them online on our Uplift resource so that they didn't have to do any of that digging on their own. And then we created all of these documents aligned to our PYP program of study so that no matter what they were selecting off the list, it would easily connect to their IB work. And finally started to create a bunch of resources and professional development for both teachers and leaders to help make sure we were able to kind of implement this program and people were ready to make that change. Again, some of the challenges we saw were just text selection was kind of all over the place. We also saw a lot of skills being taught in isolation. And so an example would be when I'm talking about making inferences, giving kids a definition for the word inference instead of actually having them find places in the text where they would need to make an inference. So we saw a lot of that, and kids weren't able to make those transferable connections on their own. We saw a lot of inconsistency in our approaches before we implemented this model, and people were not really implementing any program with fidelity, and they were unbalanced. So if a teacher really loved a certain part of the reading block, they would teach that for a really long time and sometimes miss out on making sure they were teaching the whole program. To give you an example of kind of what it looks like, because there are, in a balanced literacy program, there are a lot of small components that come together to form what is about a 2-hour reading block, more once you add writing. And so kind of shows you just our gradual release of what we do like for kids when we read aloud to them. We have some practices that we do with kids, so shared reading, close reading, and guided reading. That's really that really individual digging deep into a text approach. And then kids doing a lot more independent reading. This is probably one of the areas where we made the biggest shift. In our upper grades, it's now a minimum requirement that 4th and 5th graders are reading by themselves for at least 40 minutes a day, which is a huge shift from what we were doing and making sure they're getting a lot of reading time. So in terms of what supports we've been providing, like that's been a little bit different this year, the first thing is we have 3 curriculum coordinators at the primary that support our 16 primary schools. We actually assigned each one of those curriculum coordinators to a cluster of 5 or 6 schools. So that way the curriculum coordinator could be there a couple times a month on the ground with the leaders helping do that work. We added about 12 additional professional development sessions already this year. They were all optional that teachers and leaders could attend to learn more. Erin has been nice enough to come start collecting some exemplar videos of teachers doing this in action in our schools. And we've been able to provide a lot more resources on campus. So I talked a lot about that independent reading piece. We actually noticed that our schools didn't have enough books. And they didn't have enough really good books that were aligned to our program. So I reached out to Scholastic. They were nice enough to create a list especially for Uplift. They took our IB units and found books that aligned to those topics that were on the right level. And in the next couple of weeks, we're going to deliver about 75,000 books to our primary campuses to make sure that we have enough text in hand for kids to do that reading. And then we've been working with our managing director team and our dream of directors to create more alignment on collaboration day. So those couple of times that we bring all the teachers together, really making sure that everyone's getting consistent development on this model so that they can implement it with fidelity. So I know that was probably a lot, and you guys might have some questions. I don't want to go into Anson's road, but what, if any, questions you have either about what we presented, or if it's anything else in that model that you've been curious about? Yes.
Are you doing a similar analysis for the books that ELL students are reading to make sure that they also are appropriate?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. One of the big asks that we had for Scholastic is that when we were thinking about our DEI push and our SEL movement, we actually wanted to make sure that the books had a nice variety of diverse characters so that it was relatable for our scholars. In addition to everything you heard right now, our ESL program, we pushed out our first ever consistent intervention literacy program for all of our ELL scholars. So we're actually, we put the leveled literacy or LLI kits in every school, and we trained every one of our ESL staff members on that. So we are right now tracking. I will have the first update on the first round of data from the implementation of that program on November 1st. So we could add that into the academic board date coming up. But we have that specific program for those scholars because we know we need to intervene early and often and make sure it's a research-based program with them.
And then what about resources for parents such that, you know, you have a resource guide so the kid might take the book home and the parents know some of the things to kind of listen to, or having both of those resources available in English and Spanish?
Yeah, we have not started doing that parent piece, but I think that's a really good push for us. I know it's something we need to do, so I think that's probably next up on the to-do list once we get past this.
That's a great piece of feedback.
Yeah, really helpful.
How are the teachers, how are the educators responding to the new model?
Yeah, so I think it's been a little bit of a balance, right? It's been a lot of people that this makes a lot of sense to them and they're really excited. It's also very different, and change management I think is always challenging. So we've heard both from teachers they're excited about where it's going, and it is hard to make that change. So we've been kind of slowly pushing along. In our Q1 survey, again, we saw kind of that this is hard. We need more practice. We didn't think they were going to get it in the first 9 weeks of school. But where we're seeing a lot of traction with it, teachers are really loving that more authentic text approach and a more balanced approach. Yeah.
I think you noted 75,000 books being delivered,
Yeah.
which is really exciting, and I'm still definitely a person who prefers paper-based books, but curious if you did a cost analysis or have a pedagogical perspective on e-readers, and if those are something that is included in this, or that you've looked at it all and decided it's either for or against what you're working towards.
Yeah. So we did do a little bit of talking to Ben in our IT department around what that would look like. It wasn't cost effective this time around. I think it's something we're looking at more right now as we get ready to do our DP curriculum of is that going to be a better approach? But for primary, we haven't moved that completely yet. I think that we're noticing too, there is a need, especially at that younger age, to put physical books in hand. And a lot of our programming encourages kids to interact with the text. So things like writing their notes on a Post-it and actually putting it in the book so they can come back and reference it. So I think that it's something that we'll look at for older kids, but we haven't considered deeply because of cost and then just some developmentally appropriate transitions for them at this time.
I've got a question on when you're looking at the key components to the literacy model and how you go through the amount of time that's going to be spent in reading activities. How does that work within the day's schedule? Are we able to accommodate it without shortchanging something else?
Yeah, so we've always had a really nice chunk of time for reading. We just weren't doing a really good job of parsing it out and telling them how much time to spend on each thing. And so on the papers that we give to teachers, and this does vary a little by grade level, like for example, in kindergarten, first and second grade, you do a lot more reading to the students and having them discuss, talk about it, and write about it. Whereas that read to kids gets really short when they get in upper grades. So a teacher might be reading a couple of pages to get scholars engaged in understanding what's happening in the book, but then might send them to read the rest of it's on their own. So we found we had enough time, we just found we weren't using it very effectively. I think to the earlier question, that's been one of the challenges teachers have faced, is it's really created a need to have sense of urgency, right? There can't be downtime in a classroom if we're gonna get all of this into one block, which has actually been great, but I know for teachers, that's a really hard shift.
Maya, I might ask you to go ahead.
Sure.
Go. You go talk.
So are there any qualitative KPIs we're looking at? It seems like a really positive and big shift if this goes to, if it rolls out as you see it rolling out. Are there any qualitative things that we can pull that would that are going to be beneficial for kids other than, of course,
Increased scores.
Yeah,
So we talked a lot about that when looking at models. Like one of the big things that kind of came out when we thought about our road to college teams was this lack of students having independence. And so that was a big push why we made this independent reading block so large and it grows, is because we actually found that our primary students during the day, were not having very many points in the day when they actually needed to sit and independently manage how much they were reading and what they were doing. So yeah, we really thought about, and there are some elements in those components of what are other skills we could be building. So that was really a thought. And I would say, it's really interesting to go in and watch. On the first day, our 5th graders could not all stay on task and read for 40 minutes straight. So teachers had little charts in classrooms and were actually saying, okay, today I saw that we read for 7 minutes before someone put their book down, got off task, right? And it was a big push. And so it's interesting to see how kids have started to change. I now see 5th graders who never had a book with them, and now they're carrying it. They have their bookmark in it. They know what they've read. They know if they've lost their page and they need to go back and start over. And so just some of those little things I think have been huge culture shifts for us in the primary, of letting go of some of that teacher hand-holding and letting kids really try some of that work on their own.
And Don, I'll just have a quick anecdote. I was at Luna Primary today talking with one of the deans. First, we did see an uptick in our reading scores in CA1 from this year to last year. But I think where the conversation is going, and I was speaking with one of our deans, Sylvia, really what they're doing now is looking at the data and thinking about, especially in that middle column, what do we do with kids? What do students need to experience for them to get that type of question that they got wrong right next time? And they're really thinking about what is the structure of the reading instruction they need to get. And I think in previous years, it was, they didn't get that question right about main idea, so we'll teach main idea again, which is different from really deeply thinking about the experience of teaching reading. And so I just really appreciate the push that Maya and her team has given on really pushing data conversations to a new level that we have had previously. And this is an example of how we're, if there's KPIs, really looking at the impact on the data based on reading practice that kids are doing.
Anyone add it? Sorry.
No, you go.
I don't know, Yasmin, if you were giving me we're out of time.
Definitely take Abby's question, and if I just ask is, when you close, it was surprising to me to see data go up in literally 1 quarter when campuses had 6 to 9 week rollout plans. I have hypotheses of why we saw a quick kind of pop, but would love if you could just, this is a lot of components to roll out, and which components you thought were giving us those early wins. Definitely,
But yes.
take Abby's question
The
first.
75,000 books that you're getting, are they classroom texts? Are they guided reading sets? What kind of books are they? Are
Yeah,
they
so-
extra? Not extra, but
Yes, extra. I was like, extra. It would be great if we just had extra.
Right.
No, I think that's
I
a really...
asked for a real reason, but
No, really good question, because it's not going to be enough over the time to fulfill all of these things. We're going to have to keep adding. Those books were specifically for our classroom libraries for independent reading, because we really quickly saw, do the math. If classes on average had about 100 to 150 books, with 25 kids and each kid reading a book, We realized we weren't going to get very far into the school year doing it that way. And so those were for classroom libraries. So every classroom library got a library that is specific for that grade level. So it has a range of a little above, a little below, to kind of meet the needs of our growing kind of separation of quintiles. And then they had books aligned to their specific IB units. And so a teacher will have a bin that will be specific for that unit. So scholars can also use it to like kind of extend their own learning of what they're kind of working on in class. But the books we're talking about this time around went specifically for that independent reading component. We're going to be looking at, as we go in thinking about curriculum purchases for next year, what additional resources we need for those other components and where teachers are struggling to find resource gaps.
I worked with a school and it was a project that their leader had, it was their leader's vision, but it was along these same lines, but in terms of independent reading, he really wanted to not only empower the students with the time and the choice, but also the ownership with the book. And so we sort of took it a step further, and we as the grantors were very concerned that this was really going to work, but he was right. So he gave a book, he literally gave a book to every child and said, it's yours, do what you want with it. And it was chosen grade level and reading level appropriate, and I guess to some degree subject level appropriate. But the children were told, you can take it home, you can just read it to your brothers and sisters, you can bring it back, and if you bring it back, you own a book and so do all of your peers, so you can trade as you would like. And they created this exchange program, and their circulation rates in the actual library were also significantly affected, and their reading scores in 1 year went up like 18 points. But I'm sure it was other pieces, obviously too, but you've got so much great stuff here. It just might be that one last kind of fun accelerator if you're doing a holiday program, if Cassie's wondering how to spend that money or whatever. It was very interesting to see what that ownership did. And I know you're doing so much of it.
I love that idea. I think kids are like kind of doing that now, hopefully not with all the brand new books we just bought. Hopefully those don't grow legs and walk off, but I love that idea, because I do think it's totally different if this is your book, and for some of our kids, they might not have had someone hand them a brand new book and say, this is yours.
Yeah, and that was his point.
Yeah, that's an awesome, I hope you're getting that minute somewhere.
Yes.
No, thank you. So back to Yasmin's point. So yeah, Yasmin and I were definitely sitting around talking about we kind of set out the preemptive email beforehand of we know we've asked you to make a lot of changes. Don't expect magic overnight. These people, they had 6 weeks to roll out each component until they had rolled everything out. And we do our first test 9 weeks in. So that was really only 3 weeks of implementing the full program before they tested. So we were not expecting miracles, and to be quite frank, that's what the data kind of came out. There were even times when I was like, that's amazing, because we saw bumps not only in passing rates, but we saw sometimes 10 and 15 point jumps in the rate of kids scoring advanced. And so I think that there are a couple of things that led to that really quick shift, because there were some things we rolled out first. So one of the first things we rolled out was that read aloud piece, and the questioning around it, which, and really just holding our kids accountable to responding. They had to listen to the story, they had to have classroom discussions, they had to have written responses. And we were really explicit about they have to write. It cannot just be a circle, a bubble, or a pick A, B, C, D. They had to actually write open responses, which is not something we've been really specific about requiring. And then for our upper grades, this notion of close reading, it's taking an above grade level text, and the teacher sort of reads it first with the kids, and then picks out specific portions where they dive really deep. And they're looking at things like author's craft, things like inferencing or explicit portions of the text that are really difficult to understand, and then again, having to respond in writing. And so I think those two elements being rolled out first, especially in our upper grades, were just a huge shift that we had not necessarily done before, and really helped, I think, propel some of those higher scores that we saw, and really showed us that it doesn't take much if you're upping the rigor and really holding kids accountable to doing the work before you start to see some of the gains from it. So I don't know, Yasmin, if you had another hypothesis or thought you wanted to.
My only other one is I think the independent reading is giving us a pump too. To walk across Uplift schools, so my internal team knows Mondays and Thursdays are my campus walk days. And to just like walk into a classroom like, I'm gonna step out because you are all in your independent reading block was really a pretty awesome thing to see. And I would just say on the read aloud, before, like pretty much every school in the country, we'd have lesson plan templates that you fill out and think about what questions you're gonna ask on a text. And it was in this separate page that was separate from your book. And now if you walk Uplift classrooms, you literally see Post-it notes just sticking out of books. It could be Stella Luna in like 2nd grade, or it could be Wonder in 5th grade, where one of the teachers had to have actually read the text beforehand, right? Like, which I understand should be a baseline, but now it's required. And the questions have been thought out and truly connected to the text. We know they're being asked because as they're reading to the kids, the Post-it note has that prompt right there. And so I think the level of questioning that may have been planned before, potentially, but now that it's actually getting executed is at a next level because it's right there.
Hard to ignore it, the giant.
It's hard to ignore it. So
Yeah.
I literally, in a classroom, I look to see, does the teacher's copy have Post-it notes sticking out of it?
Thank you, Maya.
And thank you, Maya, and to all the primary MDs and the heavy lift.
Awesome, and I'll turn it over to Anson.
Yasmin, you said this was 2-3 years in the making?
So we developed it over the past 18 months, and we tried rolling it out last year through a model that was not effective, which was give professional development on it and let people make the choice to opt in. And because it's really hard and requires folks to do things differently, that didn't go as well. So this summer, we made it a requirement across our schools, and it's working. So sometimes there's that rip the Band-Aid off strategy that also works, yes. Please.
Hi, my name is Juliet Wadima. I have 3 daughters up North Hills, high school, middle, and elementary. And I just have to, I didn't know that was what you guys were doing. And my 3rd grader, well, she's now in 4th grade, she was having some real struggles, hated writing. She's a great writer, she just was never motivated about writing. Whenever we did comprehension, she was not excited about going deeper and, expounding and anything to do with the author. She just wasn't motivated. And something happened, i.e. what you just talked about. And I had to ask her, am I allowed to say something? Because, I could give you a user, this is a test case in the works. She is doing so well, I can't get her to stop writing. I don't know, I'm sure you have children, but I have 3 daughters in different schools, levels. But coming from a place where she didn't want to write, and if she wrote, she just wrote that one sentence that she'd squeeze out, and it was so tedious and such a horrible experience for her. It was like pulling teeth to coming to a place where she's reading chapter book after chapter book, and talking on and on in the car about every single detail she can come across in the car, and then writing. And without being prompted, does not need any assistance with writing any homework text. So now it's, we're getting to writing a whole page when it comes to an essay prompt that required only a paragraph. We are now working on, reducing that to, it's now full page. So I would commend you guys. I didn't know this is what you were doing. So thank you. I'm so glad that you allowed me to walk in. I thought you'd have to throw me out. But thank you, and I'm so excited. Keep up the great work. Thank you, thank you.
So Anson's going to talk a little bit about a big push we're making in our middle schools. Our course structures.
Thank you. So, greetings, guys. Again, I'm Anson Jackson, one of the MDs for middle school. My counterpart, Christina Nene, on my left. She helps me with this work every day. So I wanted to share a little bit briefly about the course structures, kind of our push for middle school. I want to first set the context of kind of the purpose of the course structure, kind of the rationale why they came up with this. First thing is middle schools, Uplift want to be all the IB. IB is very nebulous to say that we're going to be an IB, the vision of IB, and so the core structures kind of took this nebulous idea of IB and made it a very structured, like things we could actually do, actionable. And so that's the document you see is a framework of these are actions they can take, teachers can take, and leaders can take to make IB in action. The reason why it's important. Look at who we hire. We hire new leaders, new teachers. To do an effective IB instruction at IB school, you need to have two components. First is strong pedagogy and strong content. New teachers lack both. They don't know the content or the pedagogy. The course structure aligns pedagogy and content together. So you can see we have, this is a literature course structure. You may have a science course structure. It's content-specific pedagogy that drives rigorous instruction. So kind of two things happen in one document. Continue. So kind of the goals for our course structures. First, we'll have leaders, teachers, coordinators who sit on my team to have the same common language around instruction. So I can take a math curriculum coordinator, a leader or a dean at a middle school, and a teacher and have the same verbiage around content-specific instruction. Lesson planning meetings will leverage these documents. Observations leverage these documents, and PD align to these documents, which all align back to our vision of having an IB-aligned middle schools. Next, establishes instructional non-negotiables. So I can go to any Uplift school and see a math classroom with these 5 components. ELA classroom, these 6 components that are aligned to IB. It's not like a blueprint for you must do this, but it gives them a framework of things to look for in implementation. Third, we have lesson frameworks. So we give leaders and teachers like timestamps. You should spend 10 minutes on this piece of the lesson, 10 minutes on this piece of the lesson, 10 minutes on this piece of the lesson. So they have a framework where to begin when they get into instruction. And also it gives them strategies. So what's the best strategy for teaching fractions or teaching poetry? And these documents provide this for teachers and leaders. Clarifies course requirements. So we have math requirements that we should see in every math lesson or every ELA lesson or science lesson. And last, it gives teachers and leaders other opportunities for instruction. So it gives them other additional information for support for math, science, whatever content it is. Now, these things are very much aligned because they work in tandem. When we look at this component here, all of our PDs are aligned to course structures. Our PDs drive teacher development and leader development derived from the course structures. The course structures go back to IB instruction, which is our big vision. So you will see and hear the same thing said and spoken on campuses and our PDs. Any questions so far? Okay. I'm more concise than Maya, so I can go pretty quickly. It's not a bad thing, you know. Just an observation.
Yeah, and you said instructional non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Kind of. Is that a robotic statement of this is how they got to do it if they don't?
No. I'll go through kind of how this was created too in a second. That's a good question. So again, one thing we didn't want to have was like a robotic style of teaching. Teaching is an art and a skill, but we also, there's research-based practice that should be aligned in every classroom. So we have to kind of balance giving teachers autonomy, but also knowing these are research-based practices that every classroom should have, content-specific. And so those non-negotiables are research-based practices that we learn, study, research to implement in content-specific situations. So math will not look like an ELA classroom or a science classroom. So that was derived kind of over a 3-year period. So to kind of take a step back, over the last 2 or 3 years, the CC team, curriculum team, myself, some leaders and teachers, we came to a room and said we want to have some course structured alignment from school to school. And so I took the best math minds in Uplift, the best CCs, and we developed a math curriculum course structure. We developed the ELA course structure, and this has been kind of vetted over the last 2 years. We've gotten feedback on it. We took it, chopped it up, did some more refinements, sent it back with more feedback, and today is what you have today. So this is kind of like the new version. So it's been like a 3-year process. So in the course structure, what you have now is a small like slice. Bother a second. Imagine this being, if you watch the NFL at all or college football, the coach usually has a big kind of like laminated play card. This is a play card. So if I'm a leader and I'm walking around my school observing classrooms, I want to do an ELA walk, I take the ELA course structure, walk from class to class, and look for these components in those ELA classrooms and give teachers feedback on this document. So leaders have this as a play card to their disposal. Now, the actual course structure document is in a binder. It's about 20 pages per content. So I have a Spanish binder, ELA binder, math binder, and every content has a binder that they have. So instead of having a binder up in the classroom or the building, we said, let's do this to make it easier. It's a tool they can use, pretty efficient. So in the document itself, you would see the mathematics vision. This is a math particular. You would see the math vision, or the vision content for every content. So the content will describe the vision for that content. What do you want to see in a math classroom and math instruction? Second, we'll see the assessment overview. The assessment overview is a very important piece because this takes the diploma assessments from high school, the ACT, the DP assessments, and pushes those all the way down to middle school. So we're teaching rigorous instruction from the DP assessment, which we'll hopefully get to when they're seniors. Again, look at the IB alignment. The third piece, instructional frameworks. The frameworks, you will see the outline, the timestamps. You should have this much time for this piece, and also what's happening from the teacher standpoint to the scholar standpoint. So if you look at this piece here, sorry to borrow this, you should see a component that says teacher actions and scholar actions. So if you're a novice teacher or a novice leader, you know exactly what you should be saying from the teacher standpoint and the scholar standpoint. And that is in the instructional frameworks. The last independent study, it gives leaders and teachers additional information for external learning, their own learning. They want to do some more research on how to use fractions, how to use manipulatives. They can look in this section here. So I'm very happy and proud of the work the CC team has done, Mai's team, to develop these, because this document so far has helped us tremendously align mathematics, ELA instruction, science instruction across all middle schools. Questions so far? Yes, ma'am.
You said you developed this, I guess, for the newer teachers that are coming in as their playbook. Did you guys get feedback from some of the more experienced teachers that we had and say how the classroom was laid out and
yes.
it applied?
So it's a good question. You know, sometimes we do too many things for newer teachers, forget the veteran teachers. Even though it is a baseline, it does push rigor in all areas. And so this was developed by some of our best teachers. So we took some of the best teachers, strongest content teachers, strongest teachers, and help us develop this document that we could use across the board. The goal is to strengthen the gap between schools. So right now, if you notice, we have gaps in performance from school to school, class to class. We want to make that gap smaller and see all of our schools grow at a decent rate. Yes, ma'am?
Is this document, I think you alluded to this a tad bit, but does it align with teacher assessment, end of the year, half year, like a
Good question,
star?
good question. So the star or the observation form?
The observation.
Yes, so we have an Einstein form that was developed last year, and so we work with leaders and teachers on how to implement feedback in that form aligned with it. So for example, we should see feedback aligned to course structures, and that is from our PDs, our coaching development. So if I was, let's say, coaching science, I'd want to see borrow this again, I'd want to see the vocabulary from this course structure and the observation form.
Okay, right. So anecdotally, we should be able to have an increase in kind of, I don't know, teacher satisfaction because they're being graded on the things that they know they're being graded on, and there's no ambiguity. And do you know what I mean? Some kind of correlation with I'm more satisfied in my job because I know what you're going to be grading me on, and I'm not surprised when you tell me something.
We would hopefully see that and have the same vocabulary. So
Yes,
it would,
yes.
exactly. So it could in turn lead to greater satisfaction because we're saying the same things. Yeah.
You know, one of the trends that we saw in terms of leaders giving feedback to teachers was that the feedback was largely around classroom culture and management. And yes, they should give culture and management feedback, but if you're giving feedback to an 8th grade algebra class, we want to see feedback in how did you approach the teaching of math. And I think where this structure has been beneficial is, A, our managing directors are holding our leadership teams accountable for weaving the language of this in the teacher feedback, one. And then two, it almost forces them to give math feedback versus feedback on classroom culture. So we're trying to almost pivot the distribution of feedback to make sure that it's more content, work specific versus culture.
Right.
So a prime example is I did a visit day on Heights. I did a science follow-up walk. So we do our check-ins once a month and we usually focus on one content area around the course structures. So what we had action steps, and I want to follow up with you on with Ben, the director, in a few weeks. I did a walkthrough with the science document, Ben and myself together, and then Ben then writes the feedback to the teacher based off this document. So it's emailed to me, I see the feedback, and it verbatim hits these components aligned to the course structures. The teacher gets the good feedback, and we should see those actions implemented in the next few days or few weeks. Yes, sir.
What about on the student action? How did you get the buy-in from the student to follow this?
So this document is not really student-facing, it's teacher and leader-facing. So the students don't really see this. This is what we should see, the teacher actions lead to these things. So for example, I don't know which form you have, but if this is...
I've got the math one, and there's a section on the student actions, things that you would expect them to do in each one of these areas.
Okay, so you would expect the teacher to do things to lead scholars to those actions. So if one of the actions, let's say, you're reading action for math.
Ask and answer questions.
So we should see the teacher asking questions and then giving kids answers to answer and also ask each other questions. That should be in the lesson plan. So if students won't actually see this document, this is really a planning piece for the teachers to ensure scholars are doing those actions.
I love this. I think this is amazing, the work that you all are doing. Does this, two questions, does this extend beyond just the middle school, and then are there linkages leading up to like what the extended essay, the demands of the extended essay senior year, for example, or like all the IB kind of demands that are in high school?
Yeah, so these are secondary documents.
Right.
We've done the kind of the hard rollout in middle school first,
Okay.
partly because with the diploma program applications that's taken up a lot of our leaders' time. But my sense is that over the next year, 2 years, we'll be rolling this out specific.
It'll get extended to
our
the
high
primary
schools.
and the high school.
Well, not to primary,
Not to
because the primary is using the framework that Maya talked about
got it.
earlier.
Okay.
But we definitely want to see these, this in our high schools as well. But we just did the rollout in the middle school first.
Got it.
One thing we are doing though is this piece here. Every document has that in there. The backwards planning from the DP assessments. So we should see in this assessment overview, it plans from the DP assessments. So it goes from the DP assessments to middle school STAR. So as we build our assessments, we should think about aligning them to the DP assessments in high school. Also, we're doing some work, Christina and I, around aligning, looking at North Hills as a model. How do we align our writing backwards plan from the writing assessments to middle school? So if we have to get to this level in high school, then how does that look in 6th grade,
right.
7th, and scaffold that back? So we're doing some work with North Hills to kind of make that a more Uplift network model across the middle schools.
When do you think that'll be fully rolled out? Sorry.
It's okay. It's a good question. Good question. We're not sure yet. Hopefully next year. We do have a 3-year plan of rollout. So this is plan 1. Year 2 is increasing rigor, and so we're now in year 1 of having a baseline, and year 2 would be increasing the rigor around that exact thing right there.
This is awesome work that y'all are doing. This is amazing.
And along the athletic analogy, what if there's an audible? I guess Richard was trying to, what if the student doesn't, needs further instruction and they have to be audible, right?
Correct. So there are interventions in place. Again, this is not the end all be all. This is to get a baseline of instruction. So in order for us to grow middle schools, all middle schools, we gotta have a baseline. And so right now we have IB authorized schools that look very different. So for example, Heights is IB authorized, may not look like Williams IB authorization, the same authorization. And so in order to really grow the rigor and really be a true IB network, we have to have a baseline of IB instruction first. Given the context of newer teachers, new leaders, new content, we believe this will help us get that baseline of instruction to then go to that more rigorous place.
One could make the argument, if you have this baseline in place, it would be easier to make those audibles, right?
Exactly.
Or call timeout.
Or call timeout. Whatever the analogy is. We go to basketball.
Okay.
And so this is an example of the course structure, and I kind of take an instructional model of hands-on activities. So I've just modeled this for you guys. If you look at the math document, you should see manipulatives in one of the strategies. I've given you manipulatives. This is yours. So this is instruction actually taking like this teacher action. I'm the teacher providing manipulatives, and I'm saying, okay, now you manipulate these things. And as I can see, you guys are using these, looking, asking questions based off the manipulatives. So as the question was, how does scholars use this? You're doing it right now. You're implementing the scholar action by using the manipulative. And so this is what you would see on a math document as well as the other documents. The vision component will change based off the content. These are very content specific. So this is math, fluency, inquiry, communication around the world. If you look at ELA, you may see framing the inquiry, you may see contextualization, synthesis, purpose, and precision. So it varies per content because every content is different. Then if you go over here, this gives you best practices to implement the vision component. So for fluency, during a model, cold call around operation fluency. Point 1, point 2, point 3. For inquiry, it gives you 4 to 5 bullet points of strategies. For communication, bullet points of strategies, real world, same thing. So it gives teachers and leaders a very, like a game plan to implement rigorous research-based instructional practices in every content area. Questions?
Where do you anticipate you'll get pushback?
Well, I would say we've been very strategic in this rollout. Again, this has been a 3-year plan, so we haven't really got any pushback at all. We invested leaders, and honestly, we have not. I invested leaders 2 years ago in this plan, so I've had some of my best directors, best leaders, best deans, best teachers, CCs helping me build this, helping us build this. And so we rolled out this summer. They're very invested into it. So if you go to a campus now, you will hear the vocabulary, you will see these in hands on their walls. I think the hardest push is getting the feedback aligned to this all the time. So they still like to, I guess, go back to the cultural feedback around the easiest thing is manage a classroom. It's very quick wins. This is more nuanced by content, and so some of our leaders don't know math content, or they may not know ELA content, and they revert back to giving easier feedback, which is low level, have all kids clap their hands or do a raise hand call instead of true nuanced instructional content feedback around how do you answer rigorous questions for an ELA passage? How do you have students understand fractions at a deeper level beyond just the computation, but at a more model-based visualization, and that's where these structures come in place.
Wow, okay. Really fabulous job.
May I have these back, please?
Well, I think
Mark, we're gonna, hey Mark, we're gonna go to Daniel. We're gonna go to Daniel.
so in the continuation, I think we're gonna all switch down to the Uplift Spotlight, which is going to Road to College. And we are so pleased to have Daniel Bray with us. He's new to our staff this year, I think, right?
Yeah, about
a couple months, and you're doing a great job out here, so thank you very much.
I appreciate that. So one of the things that we wanted to do when I first got here was to kind of finish out our staff. Kind of with that, along the lines of kind of finishing our staff, was also kind of finishing out what our strategy was around those pieces. So being that we have a new director of alumni programs, Brittany Searle, kind of really working on what the strategy for our alumni was, as well as looking at Yanadera Mendes Magana, who also is an Uplift alum as well, went to Uplift Summit, working on our manager of Road to College partnerships. So again, kind of increasing our partnerships as well too. So not only understanding what our alumni strategy is and kind of building that out, but also working on creating more opportunities and more partnerships for our students, for our alumni, to have institutions that they can go to that have better support systems around them. One of our key strategies around that is development of a middle school curriculum and programs for early college explorations. One of the things we're really trying to do is really understanding that the road to college isn't just a 9th through 12th grade thing. One of the things I've really been trying to build up with my team is understanding that the road to college really is a 6th grade through 16th grade thing. So really our job is to really focus and work with them as much as we possibly can from the moment that they join, that they come into middle school, really to the moment that they're graduating from college. So everything that they do between 6th grade and 16th grade is something that we feel like we need to be supportive of and put systems in place around them that allow us to be supportive of the work that they're doing and allow them to be successful and to create kind of that additional level of depth and focus for the work that they're doing. One of the things we're also really working on is trying to increase our level of alumni support, intervention. We're working really closely with our local colleges, both Unadira and Brittany, working on creating more partnerships and deeper partnerships with our colleges that allow us the opportunity to really kind of focus and create additional supports and interventions around those scholars that support them when they do go to those institutions. And then kind of third, launching new college partnerships, which is really directly related to the work that Unadira is doing. Launching new college partnerships that allow us to support those selective colleges and allow us to have our scholars attend those selective colleges and give them that kind of higher level access once they're there. So this is kind of comparing us, some of the work that we're doing, to some of our charter school peers. One of the things that a lot of the data that I have for this is unfortunately affected by a non-disclosure agreement, but at the very least what I do want to kind of show you all is that we do have one of the highest overall ACT scores from all kind of our local charter school, or not local, but charter school growth fund peers. We also have over 55% of our class of 2011 has graduated from college already, and there's a total of 73% approximately that have either graduated, so including this 55%, plus an additional 18% that is still enrolled in college as well too, so tracking well towards that graduation rate. Yes, sir.
Do you have numbers for those that have left college?
So, like I said, approximately 27%, right around there. I don't know the exact number, I can get that for you.
So a third?
About 25% or so, yeah. So about a quarter of them have left at this point. So then, areas for growth within that. So we had a lower percentage percentage of applications to our highly competitive and most competitive schools. Significantly, not significantly, but quite a bit lower than what some of our peers were doing. One of the things that we did notice is that part of that we think is at least based on just location, or geography in terms of the institutions that are applying to. Our local institutions aren't some of the most competitive institutions, so when you're looking at students who want to apply to schools that are in Dallas County or in Tarrant County, those aren't your UCLA, your Stanford, your USCs, or not your Harvard, as the case may be. So you have a tendency to have students who have lower schools, or schools that may not be as competitive on their applications, although they have the ability to get into higher schools, higher level schools, more competitive schools. They're applying to the schools that are here because there's a comfort level of being in a place that you're from. So really trying, again, for us, is kind of two-part. One, working on the number of partnerships that we have, and then two, having our college counselors and our deans of college prep be more understanding and more aware of the kind of success rates that our students have once they go to these kind of institutions that are away from where we are here in Dallas County. The projected graduation rate based on our national trend, on our kind of their national graduation rate. So looking at like our demographics and the schools that our students went to, what we're projecting is a 51% graduation rate for the class of 2017. The goal then obviously is to move that number from 51% up to 70, up to above 70%. And so working through some of the different intervention strategies that we've tried to create. So working with those local schools, as well as trying to create some different alumni supports, is how we kind of plan on moving them forward. And then this is kind of our last bit, and kind of I think kind of refining kind of what we're doing even more. So working on kind of increasing our number of college partnerships, really trying to define what best match actually means. I think we've got a good definition, but continuing to refine that and create a process that allows us to really align our scholars and align our alumni with the school that makes the most sense for them. Expansion of our Uplift College Fair, like Rich said earlier in the presentation, we had over 80 school partners. We really want to see that go to well over 120, 150 even. As we continue to kind of grow our senior classes, we need to grow the number of partnerships that we have that go along with that. And so that's one of the programs that we want to do to kind of help with that. And then also really wanting to kind of gain a deeper knowledge of our financial aid by institution. So we know that different institutions give different level of financial aid and financial aid support. So what we want to do really is really work closely to understand what that means, so that we can best have the best kind of tools related there to support our scholars as best they possibly can when they're making that college decision. So really kind of supporting that best match piece as best we possibly can by understanding also what the financial aid that information that goes in there, so that we can really kind of give them great coaching and great guidance as early as they possibly can, as early as we possibly can, that will allow them to understand that. The graph that's up here speaks directly to kind of our best match. One of the things that we're seeing is that we're seeing a significant number of our scholars who are applying or who are matriculating to either a below safety or safety school. And the way that we kind of look at that is that just isn't acceptable. We need to really do a better job of making sure that our scholars are going to schools that align with the level of their ability, the level of their talent, and not allow them the opportunity to kind of just get by finding an institution that really won't be or won't give them the best opportunity for success that we expect from them and that they deserve. Any questions? I imagine probably.
On the 27% that don't make it through or have left the college system, what's the analysis on the reasons for that?
So we actually have a survey that's going to be going out later this month, early next month, that'll really kind of ask that question. We don't have a great understanding right now of what that actually is, but it's something we're trying to gain a better sense of so we can create some interventions around that.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two big variables, right? The good majority of that 27%, I would say half of that group are students who start at our 2-year institutions, though those students do not persist. And then you're looking at probably 1 in 6, 1 in 7 who attend one of our local 4-year colleges and universities like in Arlington or Commerce, UNT, Women's, that don't make it to sophomore year. Hence, a lot of the interventions that we're looking at are what do we need to do for freshmen? Because if we can get them to sophomore year at our local institutions, their graduation rates appear to be above 70%, which is great. So really, we get that loss that first year, and so really the survey is really to almost pinpoint what are the variables that play out in year 1 of a college student. And this we'll be able to understand, especially by local college and university, so that we can start thinking about what the interventions need to look like based on the feedback that we're getting.
Yeah, so one of the things that I can just, so my background's in higher education, and one of the things that we know is that, just from the research that we do, is that typically by about that first midterm, for most of our students, for most students that are attending a 4-year institution, they know then whether they'll be continuing on or not. Just because they've already kind of have felt those feelings of inadequacy, have felt those feelings of not being able to be successful, and so if we can kind of understand as early as possible, that's really where those interventions kind of come into place. Like Rich kind of touched on, like I said, our 2-year schools have not done a great job, so we're trying to work with our 2-year schools, working with Tarrant County, working with Dallas County to try and find better ways of creating support structures around those scholars once they are there, so that we can really kind of nestle them and kind of keep them supported and safe once they go ahead and leave once they leave Uplift.
Rich, I have a quick question. Do we collect any data on whether the ones that go to the 2-year schools actually graduate from the 2-year schools?
Yeah, so you're looking at
5%.
Yeah,
out of the
less
400
than
plus students we've sent to
less than 5%.
Yeah, you're looking at maybe 8 to 10 that have finished their associate's degree out of 400.
And where did those, the ones who finish, where do they fit into the data? Do they show up as not persisting or as graduating from, do you see what, because it's all focused on the 4-year college.
Oh, no, this is the, this is everybody.
Yeah,
This is everybody yet. So they would literally be in the young adults who have not graduated, who have dropped out of college. That's where they would fall. So our
Even though they have
data
the
is
2-year
comprehensive. It's
No, the folks with the 2-year degrees, we count as part of our graduation rates.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
But we're talking like 8 kids. Across the last, the 8 kids from graduating classes 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, combined.
20.
When I am asked by people that I'm trying to get interested in Uplift, whether it's for the CAC, whether it's donors, or I'm just trying to explain who we are, I talk about Road to College, and I always have the same questions, and sometimes I can answer them well, and sometimes I can't. People always want to know what we do to encourage students to take degrees that will lead to better employment. They always want to know how we coach students on debt. The metric I used to remember is $6,000 a year, but I don't even know if that's, whatever the metric.
5,000 it was, yeah.
What's that?
It was 5,000.
5,000 a year. And we used to, and then we have lots of data on how our kids do much better the better the school is typically. And one of my requests, and if this may exist, is I'd love to have a cheat sheet that as a board member I can have, that I can explain to people all of the above simply. I can kind of talk around it, but we have probably data on all of that stuff, and I'd love to have it at some point as a tool.
Yeah, I think that makes all sense in the world. I think it's something that I'd like to kind of favor.
So I know this is semi-antithetical to what Uplift has have as a mission, but with those persistence rates, particularly with kids in the 2-year colleges, is one of the interventions having an honest conversation that maybe they need to go to a vocational or a trade school? Because yes, we want to promote college going. However, we know that, and we can see it in the numbers of these students that are coming from very, very diverse backgrounds. Is the idea that they should go to college, or is the idea they should be happy, productive citizens?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I know that as we talked a little bit about, like, what is success, for our graduates mean, and I think that that's a definition that we're trying to refine as much as we possibly can. I think that's really part of the reason why we have tried to work with, Tarrant County and with Dallas County to figure out kind of what other support structures, what other kind of institutions are there that allow them to be successful. I mean, if they're going to a 2-year school, not every single one of them is going to transfer, but if they can go to a 2-year school and get a 2-year degree that leads them to a job that allows them to move into the middle class, there's a level of success that is a part of that. And I think that's really what we're trying to define and kind of tease out what all those kind of markers are and how we can create as many structures to kind of give them that guidance as we possibly can.
So I
Thank
can
you.
build on that. We have a couple of donors who are interested in helping Uplift get external help to do a comprehensive strategy for us around what is our dual college plus career integrated approach by group of scholar segment, because it actually is very different, right? We have kids going to selective colleges who we provide alumni support to who actually lack social networks to be able to help and assist when they're going for competitive jobs. That's one group. And then there's the group that you described who are a great option for them that's equally valuable is to go directly into some kind of vocational skills-based program or training program, and just really making sure that every segment of our population is being well served, that's appropriate for them, that leads for every segment, leading to ultimate economic empowerment. And a lot of the work that's being done, even as we've talked to folks about helping us, has been with those most struggling alumni, and I get the reason why, but we can't forget there are still opportunity barriers that exist for the rest of our alumni, and so the push I've asked as we've explored who wants to work with us externally on really being bold here is that we think about every segment of our scholar alums and not just get super narrow. So look for us to be able to share more context on that, and we'll want board input, and just if you think about the big growth studies we've done, like this is the next big thing for us is what is authentic for us around career and making sure we're addressing the needs of all the kids we serve. So it's a very valid point, and it's one that we're wrestling with too.
Yeah, I mean, so Brittany Searle, our new director of alumni programs, her background is in human resources and human resources training. So part of bringing her in was the idea of how do we kind of stretch out what kind of support means. One of the things we're also trying to do with our partnerships, and I probably should have gone into that a little bit deeper, was that we're trying to really understand not just getting them into those schools, but creating kind of support systems while they're there. So systems around leadership, around intervention, around internships, around things that allow them to kind of get to those kind of career places a little bit differently than what I think we've done in the past. And I think we're trying to, again, it becomes a pretty arduous task, but like I said, I think that there's a whole lot of space within that kind of 6 to 16 pipeline for us to kind of create additional supports and kind of coaching conversations, especially around career planning, that I think we're trying to understand right now.
I have a question. So it's interesting with 2-year colleges. Do you think an issue is culture? Because here you're in Uplift and you have a culture where you're setting expectations that they are going to go to college. Then all of a sudden they're in a 2-year college, and then all of a sudden that culture disappears. And so there's that expectation, and they're almost aimless at this point in terms of expectations. So and it's out of our control at that point too. So isn't there an opportunity to talk with these 2-year colleges about how they're setting expectations?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, yes, thank you. That leads perfectly into that. Yes. Yeah, if you want, yeah, Andre, if you want to go ahead, and I'll let Andre.
So
answer
the
this question.
context, let me just say it this way. So there's a counseling component that comes between graduation and entering a 4-year or 2-year. So that counseling expectation, the onus is somewhat on the 2-year, agree, but there's a counseling component of where are you going? So I think with Uplift, my thoughts after 6 years, Yasmin, is we've got to enrich our counseling piece.
Great.
Because we are in the inner cities, and the expectation is to go down the street and not go out of state, unless you get a scholarship. So we're dealing with expectations, in which some of us may not realize. Students in our schools, definitely Fort Worth, have never been out of the city, let alone out of the state. So the expectation of where you go is not the 4 to 2 year. It's safety, it's family, it's, you know, I've got to get a job. So I think we've got to deal with those expectations of the students that are coming to our schools. But when they come to us, I will agree. So 40%, 30 to 40% are transfer students. So we have a transfer day. So you'll see TCU, SMU, you'll see everybody in our hallway. So about 30, 40% of our students out of 60,000 end up transferring because it's affordable. $59 a credit hour, $59 a credit hour, okay? So those students, some who've got good counseling, have the expectation to go 2-year, affordable, and go on to TCU, SMU, Rice, Harvard, Yale, right? So those that have not had that counseling, who live in the inner city, may just graduate, and we don't see them at all.
Yeah. You know
They
what?
may end up to 8 or 10 at our school or DCCD. So I think we got to get ahead of the curve, because right now, the question I was going to ask, we got 39 seniors, so ACT testing intervention, right? So we need to get to 22 on the ACT, we're at 17, right? So we need intervention, increase expectation before they graduate, right? Some kind of intervention, go to college, go whatever the case may be, because we've got to deal with expectations before they get to the 2 or the 4 year. A lot of this is before, once they get there, you're right. We're losing those that are not get the scholarships. We're dealing with where they're going to go, but somebody's got to talk, have that conversation. So that's kind of give you a perspective of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day.
One of the things that Andre and I talked about, you know, Daniel, Andre and I talked about a month ago, you know, let's say if you took Mighty High School, the 39 seniors that they have,
Right.
The reality is that a good percentage of them are going to start at Tarrant County Community College. Our idea is doing something different where let's just make sure that they all go to, let's say, the downtown campus. Really increase the level of knowledge of our college counselors. Our college counselors do not have nuanced understanding of the different programs that are offered at the community college system. We need to really increase that. But then I also think by you know, or I think your point is that there is this kind of cohort-based culture that we have created at Uplift schools. Can we create that? You know, there's 6 TCC campuses. We want them to go to 1 so that way there's just stronger alumni support, that we can just make sure that everyone is choosing a degree program that's going to be successful. We can monitor, much like we monitor in our buildings. And so I think there are some unique opportunities to just think about what alumni support looks like specifically at the 2-year campuses. And it is a knowledge gap for us, both centrally with our team as well as individual counselors. And we do need to increase that, because that is where the biggest kind of dropping out, stopping short of their degree program happens the most. And we just need to learn more about the programs that they offer and just dynamically support it on site.
There's lots of opportunities, and I agree that the transfer, that would be an ideal Uplift goal as well. However, thank goodness we've applied the social emotional learning component, because some of these kids are going to get there, they're going to go, I have failed Uplift. I'm only at a community college. or I'm only in a trade school. Well, so I just did an analysis at UT Southwestern of our PhD graduates over 10 years. And these are graduates with a PhD. 20% of them were in a community college, and not just taking a course to fill a component, but have spent a year or more, whether they got a degree or not. So these are highly successful people. And I love working with our community colleges, and I think that we're missing a component, and you just count me in for helping out on some of these
I think that
support
what we
networks.
have here is an incredible discussion, and I really want to thank Daniel for being here. Andre, thank you for your perspective. Stu, for your perspective. And I think you can hear from all the comments that we're all terribly interested in making sure we can support you in any way.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So I think we're going to say thank you right now, but we'll have you back.
I hope so.
Okay. That's
Thank
great.
you.
All right, we're going to slip back to the finance and audit. And again, Stacy, thank you for your work and your team, and Jack and Bridget.
I'm going to start on the dashboard. I'm going to cover one of the slides that was in the pre-read specifically just to orient you that was new. It's going to be some version of this I think will be coming in as a standard set of or standard slide in the pre-read. We've added since the September presentation a 4-year projection on enrollment and attendance rate. And you'll see our our enrollment projection is down about 267 below what our budget would be. 40 of those are pre-K, the gap to our pre-K budget. There is potential revenue implication to this gap between our projection and the budget. However, as happened last year, we were slightly down, but we closed the gap on revenue because of different levels of program participation. That until we get the second 6 weeks reported, so participation in scholars being identified as part of the SPED program or ESL or career and tech, which actually drove more revenue than we had expected. And so until we get the second 6 weeks, which is typically when all or almost all of the identification for both SPED and ESL has happened, we're not really sure, does this gap in just overall enrollment translate into some sort of revenue miss? So we'll have more context for you by the December board meeting. We sort of a solid start to attendance rate, but we'll expect that to come end of the year pretty close at 96.6 to our 96.5 budget. We've kind of got the same cash forecast as of June of next year as we did, and as you saw in the September board meeting. For now, my team's done a lot of work. We're going to present more in December as it relates to expense management. We believe there's some upside, but before we really quantify it and call it out for you, we have a little bit more work to do. So we don't think there's a downside risk, but there is some potential upside to our expense budget. So with that, I'm going to explain slide 7. And if you've got that on your iPads or saw this in the pre-read. So we wanted to do more to explain sort of changes and what's changed since last time. And so what we're explaining here is September. What happened in September versus what we forecast to happen for September. And so September actuals came in about $4 million better in cash than we had forecast. So why?
So we're using this chart. We call this sort of a waterfall chart. There's one thing I've heard it called. Do a lot of these, Mark and I both, in our days when we were Frito-Lay, or a cause of change analysis, but what's happened and what are the drivers of change. And so green is good and red is bad. You can sort of take that into account as you see these in the future. So stair steps up in green, what things cause us to have more cash, and the things that are going stair steps down in red, what are sort of bad things, if you want to just sort of bullet down to good and bad changes. So there's also going to be the nature of changes in our forecast that some of these things are like there's a permanent difference that's happened, or some of these are just going to be timing. In a big way, most of these are just sort of timing differences. We think by the time we get to June that a lot of these sort of wash out. So we've called out a few a few of the items here. The first one, sort of cash paid to suppliers. We have kind of we think what we know what the seasonality of cash outflow to suppliers is going to be. That's sort of a guess. We think this is not a permanent difference, it's just sort of timing that we don't think there's a miss or a lot of savings necessarily in this case, because we paid $2 million less cash out to suppliers than we thought we were going to. We think they'll catch up over the course of the year. We don't think that's a permanent savings. Item number 2 that we called out, we have collected a little more in September than we thought we would in state revenues. We think that's timing as well. We think things are going to will flush out to be more in line with our budget. At this point, there is a slight permanent upside to our forecast on the number 3, which is the prior year program receivables. That means what money were we owed from the feds? This is really the federal government for the most part. What cash do we collect that's a little bit more than what we expected to collect from the federal government? So this is just, I think, the nature. I think we'll be able to true this up better in future years. This is really payments related to the last fiscal year that are getting caught up as we're doing a better job of synchronizing both our cash flow projections and our sort of end-of-year audit and balance sheet. The biggest areas of change that you see on here, number 4, those call-outs, those are sort of, we paid much less out to suppliers than we thought we would related to construction projects, part of our bond program. And we also drew less money down out of our trustee accounts to pay those suppliers. So those are really just a wash. So this is, in a really quick nutshell, sort of how we're going to look at whether it's explaining what happened for the last month or explaining what happened to our forecasted cash at the end of June, which is kind of the day where it really counts, because that's where our bond covenants measured off that June 30th fiscal year end. We'll have new versions of this. Jack and the rest of the committee are working with me and my team on just sort of fine-tuning exactly the right combination of projections and cause change analysis that we'll present to you. So with that, I'll just stop and see if you have any questions.
Question? Yasmin, question. Scholar to teacher ratio. Is there a benchmark that we try to achieve in that regards? Scholar to teacher ratio?
Benchmarking in terms of external benchmarking, we don't do any external benchmarking per se. We have sort of a model that we know how we relate to our charter school peers. I'm not doing any.
Like elementary, is that a 22 to 1? I mean, I'm just curious.
No, it's 25 to 1
25?
in primary and
Okay.
27 to 1.
Roughly, well, that's a per section.
Yeah.
So a student-teacher ratio is not exact. So there's 24 to 25 kids in primary classrooms, but that's not, there are more teachers there than just the number of home rooms that we have.
Because you could have a resident
So you have
teacher and
specials
a-
teachers, you have resident teachers. So that's the number of scholars per section. I don't, off the top of my head.
Is it
have
possible to
that.
get?
Absolutely, we can
Okay.
provide this.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got the data. What comes to mind more easily is how many scholars are in each section, and we
Are
pulled
in the
it.
classroom.
Yeah, right.
But you're asking for all the instructional adults we have, you want that ratio, or you want the number of children who are in a
Physically
physical classroom?
in the classroom.
Okay, so,
As it relates to
right,
teacher.
so, well, as it relates to a teacher, it's a different number than the number of children in a classroom,
Yeah, that's-
because you could have an aide or a resident teacher, so you could have
Yeah.
2 adults in
Sure.
the classroom.
Okay.
We'll
We can give you
Both
both
of-
those numbers. The
yeah,
very
let's
short
put
answer
together
on
and
number
then
of children
numbers.
in a classroom
So-
is 25,
So
but number of
is there a
children
TA
to adults.
requirement that we have? How does that work?
Yeah, we have a commitment in our charter. We say kind of what our cap would be.
Okay.
And then charters are kind of free to operate at what they set in their charter. So you basically have to follow what you say you're going to do.
The reason why it's a little bit more complicated is because our school leaders are able to allocate their resident teachers and their teaching assistants based on where they have the greatest needs. You could have one classroom with one teacher, and you could have another with 2. But we can show you both numbers.
Yeah, both would be, yeah.
All
Just-
instructional staff in, all kids, what's the ratio, and then what's the physical ratio in terms of a classroom.
And part of that allocation piece is key, you know, if there's someone to allocate, right?
Yes, and part of that is an individual campus's supplemental funds that they have access to based on the percentage of children they have that are English language
Right.
learners or free and reduced lunch percentage can drive additional campus-based money. But we can try to simplify that and
Right.
share it so
That's helpful.
the board
Okay.
has a sense
Thanks.
for it.
Can we change?
Any
This,
other questions? I'm sorry.
This chart is great, Stacy. Just a quick question on the decrease in local revenue, is that tied to the missing the enrollment number, or what drives that?
So local revenue, that's a timing thing in my opinion. So local revenue is comprised of philanthropic giving, collections from students for lunches, from our payments from Grand Prairie ISD Partnership School. And we kind of have there are some components of it we know is going to happen every month and can roughly estimate it. Others, it can be kind of squishy. And so we have basically a kind of a flat line or kind of a peanut butter spread right now in local revenue. Just had a conversation with my team yesterday about how we sort of put a little more nuance to it, and I think we will in future projections, but I think it's a timing thing as far as I'm concerned. Any other questions? Okay. So that I'll wrap up the finance presentation with that. We do have a quick slide to share. Just a quick audit update. Our team from Weaver is wrapping up our financial audit. I want to give you just a quick update. It wasn't in your pre-read, so this is new information. Richard, please feel free to chime in as you'd like. They arrived almost a few weeks ago. This is their 3rd week in the field. The plan has them to spend 3 weeks in the field and to have a week or so wrapping up the work that they do in the office and reviewing the sort of final checks of our financial statements. We just had a meeting with the audit committee, Ann Weaver and my team before the board meeting, and as far as we can tell, everything should hold to that timeline. Key things that are left, our draft to them of our financial statements will happen by the end of the week. And then we expect to have worked through any questions that they've got on either the testing that they're doing and or our financials, and then have their presentation, financial report done, present to the audit committee by the middle of next month, and then have that report to you at the December board meeting for your review and approval. So that's kind of a quick update about that. Richard, do you want to touch?
And a good meeting with them, and expect to have, I guess at the next board meeting in December, we'll present them.
Any questions on that?
All right. Thank you very much, and I love the waterfall. Thank you very much for that, Jack, and Richard, of course, audits. Appreciate it. All right, we've got 2 actual campus advisory council reports today, and I'm very excited about that. You know, I feel very strongly that is an important function for us to have to link our campuses. And today we're going to have Tony and Kay. So, look forward. I don't know who you go first.
So I am the Campus Advisory Council Chair for Uplift Grand and also Uplift Lead. And I started at Uplift Grand a couple years ago, and we've just developed a really nice rapport. There's 3 of us on my council, and we go in every month and we bring them lunch and we sit down and talk. And mostly we're talking about challenges that they're faced, especially with the high growth rate that they're experiencing. And also being in Grand Prairie, we're trying to help them connect a little bit more to the community. And this year, we brought Lee into the mix, and we wanted to make sure that we kept, you know, that campus autonomy, but also bring them together to talk about some of the community issues. So the way we've structured it is we alternate campuses. So we'll go have lunch with Grand, and then the next month we go have lunch with Lee. And we did that yesterday, actually, and I got to see, I know you'll know, but Lee is the campus within a campus in Grand Prairie. And I had not seen until yesterday what that looks like. And so that was really fun. You really can't tell except when the kids are walking around with their uniforms on. But the classrooms are all down the same hall, and you really can't tell which is which other than the way they're dressed. And what's interesting is the Grand Prairie ISD now looks a lot more like Uplift. They're starting to put the college signs up and adopting some of the best practices. So that's really fun to see. So we got to do that yesterday. And so now we've been to both campuses this fall, and our next meeting will be together. And we've already had one together already this year. So it's good. They're able to share best practices, but then we can focus on the campus too.
So thank you very much for picking up Lee as well, because I do think having it within the whole community of Grand Prairie is very important.
And it's been fun. It's really been fun to work with both of them.
Thank you. Tony?
Yeah, so I work with Uplift Heights, and we have continuity at our senior and our primary, and we have a new school leader at our middle. But it feels like all of them are doing extreme, all through school leaders are very positive this year and feeling good about where they are. They seem to work very well as a team. Did you want me to talk a little bit about the things we do at the CAC? So for me, having been on this board for a very long time, and then when I started at Uplift, we had the board structure, and we've gone to the CAC structure. When I meet with any of our school leaders, one of the first things I tell them is, I'm still not sure what a CAC is, so I'm trying to figure it out with you, and then you tell me what we do that's useful and what we do that's not. And I think the reality is every CAC will look completely different. A lot of it has to do with who's on your CAC and the personalities of your school leaders, and I think that's okay. So I tried to break down what we do into 4 things, and the one, and this sounds terribly unacademic and unsophisticated, but the one we spend the most time on as a CAC is we just try to make them feel good, and we try to be a cheerleader. And the way we do that, I copied Christine, who talked about how she does we get just a handful of teachers that really did something special during the month, and you send them a thank you note, or better, a thank you note with the Starbucks gift card, and it comes from someone on the CAC to that teacher. With Ryan's help, we sponsored a bunch of our folks to go to the Changing the Odds conference, which is social emotional health. And that was really fired a lot of them up. We're sponsoring for the second year a little Christmas gathering for all of our teachers and staff. We have one of the people on our CAC works at Mercy Street, which is one of the community partners for Uplift Heights, which is great. One of the things that I've found really easy is they love tickets. I mean, most of us know people that have Mavericks tickets or Cowboys tickets, and you can't give them away because no one wants to go. But if you give them to a 24-year-old teacher as a perk, as a thank you, they really, really love that. So we spend a lot of time on the feel-good side of things and hopefully build relationships. We don't meet as much as what Kay does. We really do, 4 meetings during the school year, 1 in the summer. I'm trying to meet individually with the deans now just over breakfast because I want to know that next layer down and have them know that if they need something from the CAC, they can call. So last year we just met with the managing directors. This year we're going to see if we can maybe establish a relationship with the deans, and it's fun. The second thing that I think we try to do is be a liaison, and what I mean by that is once a year, and it probably shouldn't be more than that, I will hear something from a dean or an MD that I feel compelled to call Rich or Yasmin or someone and say, people are kind of worried about this. And I think that's an important part of what our job is. The flip side of that is I feel like I need to be, just like I need to be an advocate for my, my school, Heights, I have to be an advocate for the CMO. About every 4th person I talk to will express concern about growth. And growth is always a challenge and a question. But I think that I can tell them that we had a really smart consulting lady that actually told someone this morning that did a 1-year study on growth, and here's where we came out and why it may be right and it may be wrong, but everybody cares about the topic. And I think they need to hear that. The third thing that I think a CAC should try to do, and we haven't had this year, but just respond to issues. So last year, I got to work a lot with Becky Nadol because the West Dallas housing issue impacted Heights a lot, and little things like that. We had a student lose their scholarship money last year from our high school, and we figured out how to backfill some of what they lost. And then the last thing, and this is something Kay and I talk a lot, I think CAC should be a sounding board. I think Kay's done a really great job of that. I'm still trying to figure that out. It's only my 2nd year at the CAC, and I think I can't tell you that my school leaders are calling to me for advice and things, and I hope to eventually get there, but I do think that's a role of the CAC that maybe we're not totally there yet. The one thing I try to tell our folks though is I don't want to tell them how to I don't want to be an academic, and I don't think that's our role, or at least for my skill set. And I feel like that's CMO, they're academics and CMO's academics, and I try to stay out of that whole conversation to the extent possible, other than for them to tell me how they're doing and tell the CAC how they're doing. So those are the things we're doing.
Terrific, absolutely terrific. Well, both of you have spent a lot of time, and it's very, very appreciated. So thank you. Just to say. Makes a difference. Makes a difference. Okay, so we go to the fun stuff now. Alex, you've got some.
Just a couple, and we're going to be quick. I'll quickly go through the policy installation items. So the first zip code preference is for the new Uplift Hannah Ranch site. Preferencing 76119, the unique piece here is 76119 is also preferenced for Mighty and Gritty, and I'll get to that in a second. The way we are, I guess at Mighty Meridian second, the way we're addressing 76119 is we are splitting it. And there is a natural barrier. If you look at the yellow box, the top part is South Riverside Drive. So everything within that yellow box, on South Riverside Drive and south of South Riverside Drive in 76119 is going to go to Hannah Ranch. The blue box below is 76140. We kind of had to cut across 76140 because you go too far south, you get into Everman, which we don't want to do. And then to the west is 76134. So those are the preferences for Hannah Ranch. Uplift Mighty specifically is a unique situation, as you know, because the school is part of a larger community project called Renaissance Heights. What we're doing is in itself unique in that we are setting a primary preference and a secondary preference. Previous to this, the primary preference were the zip codes. We're not changing the zip codes, but we're making the primary preference this area within the yellow box, which corresponds to the new mixed income housing development and single family homes that are going up that are part of the Renaissance Heights project. So that's going to be the primary preference. And then the secondary preference is going to remain the zip codes that we have in effect. 76119, you'll look, this is the north part of South Riverside Drive now. And 76103, 76105, and 76112 are not changing, which leaves Meridian. The only revision to Meridian is the same piece with 76119. Meridian has the same zip code preferences that Mighty does. Are there any questions on the zip code preferences?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So if the student is if somebody's already in the school and they have a young kid, it overrides the preference?
Yes,
Yeah.
versus sibling.
Yes, sibling overrides the preference.
And that goes with a brother or sister to that question too, if the student's already in the school.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. First preference. is
Preference,
sibling.
okay.
Well, first preference is technically
That's
children
splitting
and
the
staff.
family.
Yeah.
Right.
Second preference is sibling,
Siblings.
yes, before zip codes.
All right.
Cam, any comments? No.
Looks good to me.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
You're supposed to add.
I was going to say, I thought you were going to start. Fine.
Oh,
No,
no.
so, yeah, thank you.
Yes, all right.
So I need a motion to approve the zip code preferences as outlined for Hannah Ranch. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Same thing. Do I hear a motion for zip code preferences for Mighty? Do I hear a motion?
Second. Oh, so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Carries. Meridian, same thing. Do I hear a motion for zip code preferences for Meridian?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Fine. Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, one last thing.
One last thing,
There you go.
real quick, very straightforward. The board passed in April of 2014 a teacher qualifications policy. All we need to do is update that policy. What that means is the new Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, has replaced No Child Left Behind. Practical effects of that is really not much of anything. We still require teachers to meet state certification requirements, and be competent in the subjects they are teaching. The changes in the policy are simply changing from No Child Left Behind to ESSA, and then taking out the highly qualified language. All of the languages remain the same policy.
Do I hear any questions? So I need a motion to approve the teacher certification policy revision. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? carries. Great, all right. It is now, thank you very much. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Oh,
So if as you're walking out of your voting member who has a signature, maybe instead of passing it around,
Yeah,
if
sure.
you'll just please come sign, that would be great.
Wonderful. So it's our time for our community open forum. Do I hear anyone that has signed up to speak? Not hearing anyone, we are so adjourned. Thank
Yes,
you
thank
all.
you.